Good morning to you, Kem, and good morning to all of your listeners, wherever they are, here in Grenada, in the diaspora, in different parts of the world. I want to say a very special good morning, and thank you for having me on the program.
Right, Naz, I know you have been on the ball speaking about a number of issues. You have visited also the family members up there in Riversally who are still saddened and still mourning their loss. And you and the caretakers for St. Patrick East and West, Cecilia and John, and my good friend Joseph Andel. You have been out there meeting these people, listening to them, and, from day one. Tell me how this is going, because it's so nice to see that the NDC's, on the ground, on the ball, with these people. Tell me how things are going with that.
Well, let me say, Kem, this was a great tragedy for the country. It was a national emergency, and we responded immediately as a political organization and as human beings, as people who had heard of the loss of 11 persons at sea. We thought immediately of the persons themselves in distress in the water. We thought of their families, their loved ones, their close ones, who were living with the moment-by-moment anxiety of not knowing what was the fate of these persons, And we immediately felt the need to reach out to them. So I spoke with Sister Ann that morning and Brother Andel, and we decided, let's go up and see the families. It was a very trying period, because as we went there, you can feel the pain, you can see the confusion, you can see the anxiety, and they were in total distress. And so we did what little we could to engage them, to talk with them, to comfort them, to reassure them that all is not lost. For those that at that time we knew of only one young lady who had lost her life. We went to meet with her mom and so on. She was clearly in a state of shock, And, after that we spoke on the matter, because we were very concerned that in the face of all of this, the Minister of National Security had said nothing. The Member of Parliament for the area had said nothing. None of the government officials had spoken. This was a case in which 5 Grenadians were lost at sea. It was not in tropical waters. It was in tropical waters, not in icy waters. And for all we knew then, some of them may still have been alive with the help of flotation devices. People have survived in tropical waters for long periods of time, and we felt that as a nation and as a government, we did not see that sense of collective urgency on the part of the government officials that was required. We knew that the police were doing their best. We knew that the Coast Guard were doing their best. We knew that NADMA was doing its best, but more was needed from the government, and we spoke about that as well. Perhaps at this stage the issue is not laying blame on anybody, because at the end of the day we must use the experience as a teachable moment to see what lessons can be drawn from it to ensure that this does not repeat itself. For all we know, God forbid, it could have been a late plane that had gone down and 11 persons were out at sea. And if that is the case, you would need a much more vigorous response, not only from Grenada, but from the Caribbean as a whole, using the collective disaster and emergency capacity to deal with these 11 persons at sea. This was really a very difficult situation. One of the interesting things that came out of it, as by way of lessons, I think, is that, when somebody is out at sea in this way, then the best way to spot them, of course, is from an aerial position. So the question came up, should Grenada not consider getting some kind of, at least one helicopter, one that can service the nation? I got a message from a very good friend in New York, and perhaps I can share it by way of quotation. This is what he said in his note to me. In light of Sunday's tragedy and the many challenges faced by local fishermen and others who frequent the Grenadines Passage, the state, that is Grenada, may want to consider a helicopter for search and rescue and other natural disasters and emergencies. The Coast Guard, Special Services Unit, and National Disaster Management Agency could share in the services of the helicopter. Alternatively, it could be a private business opportunity where the helicopter is used for island tours, including the rainforest areas, etc., and in the time of disaster or emergencies, could be leased by the state. The bottom line is that Grenada needs the services of a helicopter It's a chain of islands surrounded by water, and as such, there will be the need for search and rescue or rapid deployment. Now, I could not say that any better, but this was a policy recommendation coming from a friend in New York. And, you know, I said somewhat tongue-in-cheek the other day, but it's a serious matter. We have a lot of billionaire friends that the government is boasting about. 2 or 3 of them are around. Perhaps the government can approach one of them and say, can you please, in light of, you know, what we're talking about here, donate a helicopter to the nation, if we really have billionaires as are being boasted. And then, of course, the issue of the review of legislation to ensure that the boats that passengers go on are adequately suited for these kinds of trips. I mean, we heard it was an 18-foot boat, open outboard engine boat with 11 persons on board. That seems a very difficult, inappropriate kind of environment to be functioning in. So, all in all, Kem, I think the most important thing coming out of this is that we must use it as a teachable moment, learn the lessons, and ensure that we do not repeat this tragedy again. Again, let me say that our sympathies go out to the families who have lost their loved ones and who still have heard nothing on the fate of those missing.
All right, thank you very much there, Senator Burke. Let's move on to the Silver Sands project, because news is now surfacing that the whole talk of 5-star hotel and jobs and more jobs coming with that particular project, it's not going to be a reality. And it seems as though few villas will be constructed there, and it's raising some eyebrow. And not only that, the big walls erected reminds people who traveled to the Middle East and those places as though we are in war. You know, in other words, you have to protect that with the big walls and so on. It is a concern. Speak to that for me. What have you been hearing?
Well, we have picked up ourselves that the government has entered into an arrangement for Silver Sands in which 7 villas are going to be constructed. I must tell you that I have not seen any documents that confirm this, but I pray to God that this is not the case, you know, because remember, we were assured by the government that you know, they had met and engaged a billionaire investor who had committed to building 3 5-star hotels on Grenada's beach, and that has been spoken about time and time again. We were told that the investors were now here, the investors were now coming back. The ones who had left, according to the Prime Minister, were back on board because you know, they had gotten rid of the NDC, and that Grenada was now going to see 3 5-star hotels on the island. I got a little bit nervous because when I heard the news, because I wondered whether Grenadans can support 3 large hotels of 5-star caliber on the beach itself, having regard to what has already been said about the, you know, in the tourism master plan about limiting the number of hotels. So we were a little bit concerned that the environmental integrity of Grenada's area and the Grenada's beach was not going to be deeply offended by these 3 hotels. But nonetheless, that was the promise. So we've heard now that there are going to be, you know, 7 villas built. You know, yesterday afternoon, I did a little walkabout in the Bolio area, and I met a young man who was telling me, you know, he works down there, and he was telling me, he said, boy, you know, I all the noise that I hear on radio and all the arguments and so on, I really thought it was something big that them fellas were building down there. He said, this is a little small, this is a little project, you know, and he didn't mention the villas, but I had heard of the villas. And so, you know, you have to ask yourself, if you build 7 villas there, and 7, let's say, high net worth individuals were to buy these villas, they are not coming to live in Grenada. Part of the time, they will probably come and occupy it themselves for, you know, a month of the year or 6 weeks of the year. That's the normal kind of practice. Most of the time, those places would be closed, or they will try to rent it out to other rich individuals who want to come and spend a weekend or 2 in Grenada. We don't know how frequently these 7 places are going to be occupied. We don't know And if they are not occupied all of the time, what sort of staff you're going to need there? You would need somebody to clean it out occasionally. When somebody comes and occupies the place, you will need somebody in there. But it will not create, I think the main lesson coming out of this is that it will not create any significant amount of jobs, which is what this whole thing is about. It's not just about ensuring that you build a few villas. The idea is to get people off the streets and to give them some sustainable jobs, some sustainable opportunity, a sustainable income that will allow them to support themselves, support their families, break the cycle of dependency that many of them are in, and to be able to go to the bank and say, I'm working at XYZ, I want a little loan of $10,000 to fix my house or to do something else, you know? People are looking for opportunities where they do not have to be looking to the government and begging the government and depending on the government. And many of these, the majority of our people are young people who someday would not want to be in the Imani program. They would not be looking for $700 a month. They will, when they will get engaged, they will get married, they will want a little car, they may have a child, they come together and they're looking to build their own families. So they want the independence of income and the reliability and certainty that they will support themselves. So job creation must be the fundamental responsibility of the state. We understand that the government cannot create jobs and hire everybody. But what we're saying is the government, in addition to whatever jobs it creates in the public sector, the government must take the responsibility to create the environment that will make investors want to come and do business in Grenada. And that is why we are so troubled, Kem, by the news that we are hearing about the Rex Grenadian. This government seem to be bent on taking property away from the state, monies and properties owned by the state, and simply handing it over to high net worth individuals, even taking individual private property owned by people, which the government, if the government thinks that it sees a better deal that is more favorable to whoever, then they take it away from one private owner and to give it to somebody else. And when you take it from that private owner, the lesson for the new investor even is, if somebody else better comes, they may take it from me also and give it to that person if the deal is sweeter. Yeah? And that frightens away investors. So in terms of raising Grenada's doing business ranking as a nation, right, what this government is doing is actually making matters worse. We have seen, according to the Prime Minister's own report in his budget statement, unemployment has gone up in the country. By his own admission, 30%. We know that it's closer to 36 or 37%. But the government says 30% has gone up from 28 to 30%. In other words, unemployment is rising, and the government has to do something about it. So we are very concerned, Kem, about this situation that we are hearing about in respect of Silver Sands. It does not bode well for the country. It does not, interesting, the number 7. The owners of La Luna built 7 beautiful villas. I don't know if you've ever driven through Montrouge and looked at that area.
I know where that is.
It's an area where I think there used to be, that's where the leper colony or something, leprosy colony used to be in the old days. But they've converted that place into a magnificent site with 7 beautiful high-end villas. Yeah, those villas are there. I'm sure they're costing $5-6 million each, probably. I don't know the numbers, but when you look at it, they're majestic. And they're sitting there. They're sitting there. After you finish constructing the villa, they're sitting there. Maybe somebody has bought a couple of them. I don't know. Maybe they're yet to be sold. I don't know. But the fact is, nobody's working there. And the reason that nobody's working there is that even if they're sold, the people who bought them are high net worth individuals who are going to be coming here for a couple of weeks, go back out, come back in, go back out, and there will be no long-term sustainable jobs. In other words, the idea of building a second home and leaving it there is not a business model that will bring long-term job creation to Grenada. And this is the concern I think we have in respect of Silver Sands. Then, of course, you have the issue of the reliability of statements and promises made by the Prime Minister to the nation. When he assures them that 3 5-star hotels are going to be built on Grandins Beach, can they trust the Prime Minister? Can we trust our government leader? Can we take his word? Can the nation rely on what he says? He calls me a liar. He calls other people liars. He tells the nation he does not lie. Can we trust this gentleman? You know, this is the problem that I think we face at this moment.
Right. Let's move to the Riviera now, because that particular property is earmarked for another hotel. And I have before me the deed for the lease agreement between government and Danny Fakhri's company, and that's Fazira Grandance Limited.
Right.
And in that document, it reveals a lot of things, and I'm certain you saw that. But speak to that for us, though.
Well, I have had sight of the lease itself. It's a lease that was prepared, dated the first day of October 2013. So this has been out there for quite some time. You know, of course, that these lands were owned by the Nyack family. You know, as far as we have been told, the lands were acquired from her. She has not yet been paid for her lands. The constitution of the country, the supreme law, provides that once you take somebody's land by way of acquisition, they must get prompt compensation for their property. From what we've heard from the lady speaking herself on the radio and elsewhere, she has not been paid for her lands. I believe that this matter is still in the court. But nonetheless, an agreement was signed back in October 2013 between Dame Cecile Lagrenade on behalf of the government of Grenada, the Governor General on behalf of the government of Grenada, and a company known as Fazira Grandance Limited. There is nothing here saying that this land, of course, is owned by Mr. Fakhri, but the company is Fazira Grandance Limited. We are told by those who know that this is a company owned in whole or in part by Mr. Danny Fakhri. And
but on that said lease, it says that he's a director of that said
one
company.
Of the companies, yes. But you may be a director without being a shareholder.
Right.
Yes. So we, you know, I make that qualification.
Of course.
Yeah. But you know, interestingly as well, the document is prepared by Veritas Legal. This law firm, Veritas Legal, is a law firm whose principal is Ms. Michelle Emmanuel Steele, the wife of the Minister of Health, Honorable Nicholas Steele. So Honorable Nicholas Steele's wife is directly involved in the preparation of this lease, and is no doubt representing Fazira Grandance Limited. So when we hear Minister Steele speaking on this matter, we always have to, a red flag must go up, because one must wonder whether or not the interest that he is promoting is an interest, if not interest, but the representations that he makes. That is a better way to say it. The representations that he makes are objective in their content, or whether or not they're influenced or biased by any particular interest that he, his wife, or his wife's firm may have in the situation. We are not suggesting any impropriety as such, but we're saying as when these things happen, they create an appearance of a conflict of interest, and of course the minister himself has to be very careful about what he says and how he says it once this kind of relationship exists. So his wife's firm has prepared the document. One of the things of greatest interest in this particular deal here is the rental rate of the land. The lands are owned by government, and you know, the property. We are told in the second clause of the agreement, clause 2 of the agreement, spells out what the rental of that property is going to be. It says that in consideration of the arrangement, and in consideration of the rents that are reserved and so, this company, led by Mr. Fakhri, will pay to the government of Grenada the sum of $20,000 per year. I didn't say months, I want you to listen carefully. $20,000 per year for the first 10 years of the rental.
Is it 5?
I'm sorry?
5. Is it 5 you're seeing there?
No, for the first 10 years
All right.
of the term, from the first 10 years of the term, $20,000 per year. For the next 25 years, a 10% increase, so you add $2,000 to that for every 5 years. Yeah? A 10% increase for every 5 years. And for the remaining 64 years, because it looks like a 100-year lease. Okay? For 100 years, they will have this property. And for the remaining 64 years, a rent payable in the 35th year of the term to be increased by 15% every 10 years. Right? I got this document late last night. I've not actually worked out all the numbers yet, unfortunately. But, you know, in looking at this, the first thing that struck me is, in 1991, the NDC administration gave a lease to Mr. Ethan Nicholas for what is now Grand Beach. 1991. That is 25 years ago, right? 16 and 9 is 25. So 25 years ago, right, the government of Grenada, the NDC government of Grenada, gave a lease to Mr. Ethan Nicholas for Grand Beach. That lease was for $250,000 a year. 25 years ago, a lease was given to Grand Beach for $250,000 a year. 25 years later, a lease has been given to Fasira Grand Dance Limited for $20,000 a year. 25 years later. Now, when we say that property is being given away by the government, when we say that the government is taking away the people's property and using its constitutional authority and its authority and the authority of the state to bully the nation and to take its resources away, this is what we are talking about. This is a classic example of what we are talking about. $20,000 a year, Kem, is what? If you divide 20 by 12, what do you get? 12.
That's less than $2,000 a month.
Yes, right. It's about $1,600 a month. Yeah. Now, $1,600 a month. Even if I say $2,000 a month, okay, that is not even $700 US. The average student, the average American student, the average SGU student renting a one-bedroom apartment anywhere in Grenada is paying up to $1,000 a month US, right? So an average student renting a little one-bedroom apartment in Grenada is paying $1,000 US per month for this, right? And the government of Grenada will be getting about $600 US a month from a company that is supposedly owned in part or otherwise by a billionaire. Is this right? Could this be right by any standard? What explanation can the Prime Minister of Grenada and the cabinet of the country give? What justification can they offer to the nation to take these lands and give them away to somebody who is supposedly a billionaire? Yes? Who is a billionaire? Take these lands away from the people and give it to somebody for 100 years. You know, starting the first 10 years at $600 US a year, a month, and then increasing it by 10% here and there over the next 10 or 15% over the next every 10 years or every 5 years over the next 100 years. These lands are going to be in the hands of a foreigner. Now, you know, this pattern, Kem, is what must be of concern to the nation of Grenada. This is absolutely ridiculous what we are seeing. We have seen the government, since coming into office in the last 3 years, the government has taken away, has taken the lands, the 20 acres or so of land on Grand Beach. It has deprived The government has taken it and given it back to Lewis Hamilton, a multi-millionaire, one of the richest sporting personalities in the world, one of the men with the highest income among sports celebrities in the world, has given him those lands at no cost, depriving the government of the $250,000 a year that Mr. Nicholas is supposed to be paying by way of rent at a time when the government is not creating jobs, at a time when it has young people with their associate degrees scrounging and scramping to see if they can get 2 weeks of debushing on the road, when young people who have gone away with degrees come back with their degrees, bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, are sitting in our country with absolutely nothing to do in their families' homes, at a time when this country is being told we have to make sacrifice, we have to make sacrifice, we have to make sacrifice. You give away 20 acres of land and the rents that you would collect from it to Lewis Hamilton. The government has given away or sold Camahan Park, the lone piece of green space that Grenadians have reserved for them. They have given it away or sold it and is refusing to tell the nation what is the true status, what is the real situation concerning this property. And of course the government, the Prime Minister in his interview told the nation he does not know what the hoopla is about. You know, as far as he is concerned, there's nothing to this, and in other words, Camahan Park has no significance to the people, and it really doesn't matter what they say, even though over 14,000 Grenadians and friends of Grenada have already signed that petition saying, save Camahan Park. We understand further, Kem, that at this moment, the government has agreed to transfer the lands at Mount Hartman, 281 acres of lands in Mount Hartman, which the NDC administration was able to recover. Those lands had been given away by Mitchell for $1, given away by the government for $1. But luckily, the person who drafted the agreement, and we knew who he was, drafted the agreement, left a clause in it that said, put in a clause in it to protect the interests of the government, of the country and of the state. Put a clause in there that said, if the developer does not develop the lands over a certain number of years, then the government has the right to take back the land. And when we came in, the lands were sitting there. The former government knew that the developers that they gave the land to for $1 was doing nothing. The lands were sitting there. When we came into office as an NDC administration and we realized that the time had passed and nothing had happened on Mount Hartman, we took back the land, relying on that clause in the agreement. So we brought those lands back into the property of the state, just like we had done with Issa Nicholas's land down on Grandland's Beach as an NDC administration. So we understand now that we have brought this back into the hands of the state, the government is in negotiations with a foreign billionaire who we have been told is going to invest $2 billion down there, but nonetheless the lands are being given to him. Now at this stage, we have seen nothing in the registry that suggests that these lands have yet changed hands. But what we are seeing is topographical maps are being done, roads are being cleared. In other words, people are working down there. Topographical maps are being done, roads are being cleared. Some kind of viewing post, some kind of a platform has been created for people to go and look at the lands and so on. It looks as though some kind of a sales house is going to be put on that spot. But so far, the nation has been told absolutely nothing. The government has presented 2 budgets already on this since this thing has started, and nothing has been said by the government on what exactly is happening on the 281 acres of land that are down at Mount Hartman. We have seen also that the government has taken a decision. A law was passed in the Parliament just last week in the Senate, and before that, the week before that, in the lower house, to give away the assets of the Grenada Postal Corporation to unknown interests. Again, the Postal Corporation is owned by the people of Grenada. It's a state corporation. The government has passed a law saying that it has the right, by law now, to transfer all of the assets of the Postal Corporation to a foreign company or an entity who nobody knows. Yes? Now, what is really most offensive about this is that the law itself contains a provision that says that the company cannot transfer its liabilities, its debts, cannot transfer its liabilities and debts and its obligations to this new entity that is being created. So the new entity can take all of its assets, but must not take any of its debts. So even if the new company that is being set up, let's say it's a foreign company that is taking over the postal corporation, even if the new company says, I want to pay the workers, I want to give the workers a severance pay, I want to pay the workers a special gratuity, right, or a severance, the government has passed a law preventing the new company from making that payment. Imagine that. So this is what we are facing here. The postal corporation is being given away. Gravel and concrete is being given away. And of course, we now know that Rex Grenadian is being taken away from the owners and again is being given to foreign interests. Last Friday, not last Friday, but 2 Fridays ago, the 5th of February, the government published in the government gazette a declaration or a notice pursuant to Section 3 of the Land Acquisition Act of the country, saying that the Governor General, acting on the advice of the Cabinet, considers it necessary to take Rex Grenadian from the owners for a public purpose, and that they were going to seize it. Now, under the land acquisition laws of the country, the government can acquire any property under the Constitution of Grenada. They can take property, but it must be prompt compensation, and they can acquire any property provided they make the payment promptly. The special procedure that is provided for under the Constitution and the laws is that the government must publish 2 declarations or notices of its intention. And once the second notice is published, then that itself amounts to the acquisition of the property. So the government has now issued the first notice or the first publication to seize Rex Grenadian. I understand that now this is 30 acres of land. It has that place has operated 250 rooms in the past. It is 120 workers are down there, unionized workers. They have been told nothing of what is going on. They do not know who the investors are going to be. They do not know who is involved. They do not know what these investors are bringing to the table. They do not know whether it's going to be a freehold situation or a leasehold situation. They do not know how much, if any, these new persons are going to pay. But the government has decided to seize the property of the owners of the Grenadian Hotel Limited that has the leasehold on that property. I understand, I did not hear him myself, but I understand that Minister Steele was on saying that they have not decided to acquire the property. They have only decided to issue this, effectively saying they have only decided to issue this notice as a threat to the owners of the property to bring them to the negotiating table. Now, the owners of the property own a lease. They have built a hotel on lands owned by the government that they have leased from the government, yes? So they are tenants of the government and they pay an annual rent for the property to the government. So if there is a dispute between the government and the tenant, the government as landlord and the tenant, what will govern this, the resolution of this dispute is the lease agreement itself and what the lease agreement says in it. The lease agreement will be interpreted and applied in accordance with the Landlord and Tenant Act. This is a law specifically dealing with disputes and arrangements between landlords and tenants. This has nothing to do with the acquisition of land. So if the government has a problem with the owners of the land, and with the tenants on the land, that is to say Rex Grenadian, and they feel that Rex Grenadian is not doing something that they're supposed to do, they can take Rex Grenadian to court under the lease or under the Landlord and Tenant Act. But what the government has decided to do is, rather than resolve the matter in the way that the law requires and in the way that the Constitution requires, they have decided to pull out the constitutional cutlass, and to use the authority to bully the nation and to bully the Rex Grenadian people into submission. The Constitution is not intended to be used as a weapon by the state. The Constitution is supposed to be that supreme law that protects and guarantees the rights and freedoms of the individual. It is something to put a check on the abuses of the state and gives this ordinary citizen the right to sue the government whenever it does or says anything which violates that supreme law. The Constitution itself guarantees its own supremacy. It declares that the Constitution is the supreme law and that any government that passes any law that contradicts or is inconsistent with the Constitution is doing something which is unlawful, and the citizen has no duty to obey that law. So this is a situation in which the government is treading on very dangerous waters. And of course, it is exposing itself to a lawsuit by the ex-Grenadian people. They may have already, by the statements made by Senator Steele, they may have already lost the opportunity to acquire this property, because from what we are hearing, if what we are told is true, then it demonstrates that this so-called acquisition publication or notice that has been issued was issued in bad faith, not for a public purpose to enhance the hotel stock, but to intimidate and bully the owners of the property into submission. And a court will not allow the government to acquire that property if the government is acting in bad faith. So this is a situation, once again, that shows the style of government that we are facing. We do not understand, Kem, how the Grenadian people cannot see what is going on. We cannot understand how the Grenadian people cannot see what is going on. Today, it might be Rex Grenadian. Tomorrow, it might be you. The next day, it might be me. The government cannot take away people's property and bully the people, bully the citizens. Take away the property and bully the citizens. The government cannot take away all of the property owned by the state itself and give it to wealthy, high net worth individuals who have money already and are leaving the people who are supposed to have some money, who need help, who have nothing, are leaving them stranded. So this is a very difficult situation, and one on which we are calling on those who should know better, those who understand better, those who can explain to the people, men of influence and women of influence in our country. We're calling on the trade unions. We are calling on the business community. We are calling on the non-governmental organizations and the churches. We are calling on the social partners. We are calling on the people of influence to stand up against what is going on. Grenada is heading over a precipice, and we must not allow this to happen. We may put ourselves in an irreversible situation, and our children and our grandchildren will never excuse us or forgive us for this.
All right, Senator Burke, tomorrow the NNP will be celebrating 3 years in office. 3 years. What is your view on their performance? I mean, we have dealt with that, already, but I would love to hear from you. What have you seen? What are your thoughts and your views on their performance in the last 3 years?
Well, the performance really can be judged strictly by the performance of the not strictly but largely by the performance of the structural adjustment program, because as you know, 2 weeks from coming into government, the government basically declared it was not going to pay its debts, and the government has essentially, starting at the beginning of 2014, the government imposed a structural adjustment program. It has been 3 years of solid hardship and difficulty for the people of Grenada. As you know, the government has imposed 28 different taxes, fees, charges, levies on the nation. This has led to an increase in prices on many basic goods. This has led to a reduction in income for many families. This has led to job loss for many families. This has led to a reduction in disposable incomes to the tune of somewhere between 23 and 27%, according to what we have been able to garner. Yes? And what it has meant is that, and this has also resulted in a reduction in the social or a lowering of the social safety net that is available to people around the country, things that they will normally look to, like the free school books program, like the duty-free barrels program and others. These programs have been taken away. So this has been a very trying time for the people. Yes, the government is collecting more money, but that is not translating into, and yes, according to the government, They have realized growth, positive growth this year, but that is not translating into any benefits for the people. It is not translating into any improvement on the plates of the Grenadian people at the table. It is not translating into any positive improvement in their pockets as far as incomes are concerned. People are hurting, and it is one thing when you're hurting and in distress and in difficulty. You've lost your job, you lost your income, you go into the supermarket and it's costing more. Is another thing when, in addition to that, the government is inconsiderate, is insensitive, and is bullying the people into submission. People are living in fear and intimidation, and this has been a nightmare, a 3-year nightmare for the people of Grenada. And despite all the promises, we have not seen any projects, even except the 7 villas that we are now told that are being built in the name of Silver Sands. We have not seen any significant project undertaken that we can genuinely and legitimately call an NNP initiated or sponsored project. The projects that are underway in Grenada today, whether we're talking about the Constantine landslip or the River Road landslip or the Sendal Tunnel or the Observatory Road or Wester Hall, water treatment, water storage facilities, all of these are projects that are being done on the, whether we're talking about the new equipment that is received at the airport,
the Hubble Bridge, the Lance Bridge,
Hubble Bridges. All of these are projects that have been done under the Disaster Vulnerability and Risk Reduction Project, a project that was signed on to by myself personally, signed with the World Bank for $70.7 million, the largest envelope, the largest financial transaction ever concluded between Grenada and the World Bank in the history of the relationship.
And some $21 or so million is grant aid?
Grant money of that, of the 70 million, yes. 21 of which was grant money, not loan, you see? So I'm saying this to say, if we look at what this government has achieved, the only thing that this government has brought to the table so far, right, is the Silver Sands villas. And, when we look, you're not seeing anything. In fact, what you're seeing is worse, not better. Yeah. So we have not seen any projects. In fact, we have lost projects because, as you know, the Parliament, we had secured monies to do the Parliament, and once the Australian government realized that it was the NNP that had formed the government, they took back their money. They withdrew their position. So with this situation, there is nothing to write home about. There is nothing to laugh about. And we are asking people to be objective, to be reasonable, to be fair. We know that, the government was voted in 15 seats to nothing in the last election. And that we as a political party, we have a responsibility as an alternative, as a government in waiting, not simply to point out what is wrong or what this government has done wrong, but to say to the nation how we are going to fix these problems. We have said how we were going to deal with structural adjustment. We agreed that the economy needed to be restructured, but how we were going to restructure it was to ensure not to try to do this in 3 years, but to try to do it in 10 years, not to impose such a burden, such a harsh burden on the population, onerous burden, trying to solve this problem based on narrow political considerations, but to do so in partnership with the other political party. Do this on the basis of consensus where we can agree on a 10-year program for solving this problem that everyone will be able to benefit from. There will be growth, there will be income generation, and that people will feel more certain and more stable and less insecure about their economic circumstances. So these are things that, Kem, we as a political party will continue to speak about, to articulate, to share with the nation our perspectives on, to present alternative ways of making things happen, in the hope that when an election is finally called, the people will realize that the National Democratic Congress is a committed team of young, energetic, committed Grenadian patriots who are prepared and willing and committed to take this country from poverty to prosperity.
Well, Senator Burke, thank you very much for that interview there, and I wish you all the best for the entire day. And again, I know I can call on you whenever there is any issue that we want clear up or to be articulated on. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. And good morning.